Howdy, people, and welcome to another A Tippling Philosopher. No, ATP Geopolitics, Ukraine War Update Extra. This is where I give you the extra tidbits and juicy nuggets to get your teeth into this war, give you greater understanding and context for what is going on. Let's go to the idea that, well, the fact that the US have offered a whole host of equipment. In fact, let's go through some of that equipment again. I know I briefly ran through this morning. 50 Bradley IFVs and 500 TOW anti-tank missiles that can go on top of them, depends how they're configured. 250,000 rounds of 25 ammunition, depends how they're configured. So that's obviously they're getting both. 100 M113 APCs. I showed you those are quite old school APCs, will be useful. Don't have to be on the front line, they're just moving people around. 55 MRAPs, mine resistant armored personnel carriers. Doesn't tell you what ones, sorry, mine resistant ambush protection vehicles. Doesn't tell you exactly what ones they are. 138 Humvees, which are kind of light MRAPs, arguably. 18 155 self-propelled howitzers. I did a little talk on that. I'm going to go through a bit of an article that's written on that in a second. And then loads of artillery rounds and 36 towed howitzers. Now, why this is so significant? These first 5 points here, that reads as 361 vehicles. That is phenomenal. 361 vehicles. If you had 36 towed howitzers, then that's 400 pieces of equipment, give or take. That is a massive, massive round of aid, military aid being given from the US to uh, Ukraine. And then if you count up all the other stuff that's been given, what the French have said, what the Germans have said, what the um, every other nation that's decided to give stuff to Ukraine, then you've got a vast array of equipment that is going to be thrown into play in Ukraine. We're going to talk a little bit about logistics in a bit. I want to just talk about. So someone said, well, yeah, but it'll take months. It might be March before they are. They both have delivery and training on, say, the Bradleys, and that may well be true. However, yesterday, as soon as that was announced, there was geolocated footage. I don't know. I assume this footage was from yesterday as well, of M2 Bradleys on the move in Bulgaria. So that is very close to uh, Ukraine, and you might end up having some Bradleys. Traditionally, what's happened is these announcements get made after the fact. They're kind of post hoc communiques. So the vehicles are often in, or pieces of equipment are in the country already, and then some weeks later they announce that they're going to give these. Uh, I don't know if that's the case with the Bradleys. However, it could be that there are some close. The US has a bunch of Bradleys right around the world, I would have thought, and they'll have Bradleys in Germany. Again, I would have thought. So there could be a case for them getting Bradleys uh, to Ukraine fairly quickly. It's just a really good package that the US are given. And in that package, as I said this morning, there are 18 SPGs, self-propelled guns, or SPHs, self-propelled howitzers. And I talked about Forbes having a really good article on that. The new Ukraine howitzers make headlines. So they're talking really about the Caesars and the Panzer Howitzer 2000s and these kind of headline howitzers. But the M109 gun toils in obscurity, so it's working hard, but it doesn't get the props that perhaps it deserves. The M109 should be getting more attention, it says here, though the precise numbers aren't available. Analysts believe Western democracies have provided Ukraine somewhere around 50 M109s, probably more than any other 155mm NATO standard self-propelled gun provided Ukraine to date. And yet, while the M109s are on the field in numbers, the West has heard little about how the relatively old school self propelled gun is performing on the battlefield. Now, there have been some reported losses of these, quite possibly because they don't move as quick as, say, the Caesar, which is on wheels. These, I think, have a maximum speed. Let's find where you are. So here it goes. So as missions go, it's an unremarkable platform. So it is a middle of the road platform when you're talking about the most modern piece of kit, but built to do little more than lob 155mm shells between 13 and 25 miles. At 35 tons, the M109 is neither a long range heavyweight like Germany's 55-ton Panzerhaubitze 2000, 155mm gun, nor a wheeled and fleet-footed 18-ton Caesar 155mm. It's just a somewhat frumpy evolution of World War II era artillery doctrine. And here it goes on to talk about the speed here. So the M109 is a culmination, a culmination of several time-tested design strategies. It's nothing special. Unlike the Panzerhaubitze 2000, the M109 is not built to carry super long-range strikes, hitting targets up to 42 miles away. And as a relatively plodding battlefield platform with a maximum speed of 35 miles an hour, the M109 can only muster half the speed of the romantic French-built shoot-and-scoot Caesar. But as Ukraine publicly struggles to keep the Panzerhaubitze 2000 in the field, so this is because it's being used so much, it needs quite often they need maintaining, and they've got to take them to Lithuania. At the moment, is the main place they're going to get fixed up, and that means that they're out of usage for 2 weeks. As Ukraine publicly struggles to keep the Panzerhaubitze 2000 in the field, and as Ukrainian soldiers wear out the few available Caesars, the M109 has been operating in a news vacuum. Presumably, the platform is quietly getting the job done and enjoying the fruits of a simple, mature system and a robust supply of gun barrels and other spare parts. So, because these are quite Panzerhaubitze 2000 Caesars, not a huge amount of them being built. They're expensive because they're not making them to scale because the demand hasn't been there, even though they are really good. The M109 has been around for ages, so there are heaps of spare parts, and that means the logistics is nice and easy, and it means they can be operable for a more optimal amount of time. Um, what little we do know is that survivability has served as something of a trade-off. While Panzerhaubitze 2000 Caesar have been bloodied in combat, the speed and long reach of both platforms have kept battle losses to a minimum. The shorter range gun aboard the plodding M109 has forced the platform into the conventional battlefield, and it has taken some attritional losses. I think Oryx has said 6 of 18 destroyed. So this is the Polish. Oh, no, that's Polish provided Crab, which is also a self-propelled howitzer, but not doesn't get as much respect, I guess, as the Caesar or the Panzer 2000. It, 6 of 18 have been destroyed and 2 damaged. I actually think more than those have been provided, but I'll have to look into that. And there have been a few M109s that have been reported as lost, or as in damaged and destroyed. But at the end of the day, that's what you're going to get for a vehicle of these kind of statistics. Um, but it's useful, undoubtedly useful. Not getting maybe the news it deserves, and it's great to see another 18 of them being thrown into the battlefield as well, into the uh, onto the front lines. Logistics thread by Trent Telenko, who's a logistics expert. I love this. This is really important as well, and it's relevant to all the material that has been given to Ukraine. Now, I've been asked by several people in my threads to take a shot at the maintenance and logistical impact of lots of new Western weapons on Ukraine's military. Specifically, does Ukraine have the experience and personnel to move it, repair it, maintain it right now? Short form, no. Longer form, a lot of the Ukrainians the West has been training these last 5 months have been instructors to train Ukrainian maintainers, and other logistical people to operate these new rounds of Western equipment. Related to all of this training is an important thing to know on the sociology front. Ukraine has a really low Gini index. It doesn't have a huge stratified income gap between the richest and the poorest. So the Gini index measures difference between rich and poor. Income difference. So you'll find that in America, America has a really big difference between the rich and the poor. You've got so many super rich in America that it skews your mean GDP, for example. So you look at America and you think, wow, the GDP is amazing there. Everyone's got loads of money because the gross domestic product, the amount that it produces, is really good. And uh, you look at the mean wages and you think, God, the average wages are really good in America. But these things are kind of skewed by the super rich uh, getting a whole load of the income from that production and making a whole load of money, and the super rich have so much money that it skews the mean average uh, upwards. So it looks like the average income of everyone in America is really good. So therefore, most people got a bunch of money. Actually, there's a load of poverty that goes on in America due to the fact that there is a big, massive gap between the rich and the poor, and the super rich skew that average. Anyway, all that kind of stuff is really, really interesting when you're looking at, economics, and geopolitics and whatnot, and sociology. But here he says that plays into the idea that there's a low difference between the rich and the poor in Ukraine, comparatively speaking. And that means there's a deep penetration of computer usage in the population. So it means that actually there isn't this advantage that people have by being born into money or by having, a greater opportunity to access certain things. It's like most people are broadly able to access the same kind of stuff like education and technology and so on and so forth. Most of my DLA, DCMC, DCMA government career, it was you need X years of experience with our mechanization of contract administration services, MOCAS software, for contracts and staff jobs. Those federal supervisors were mirror imaging their experience from before 1990, when computers were mainframe and mini computers that were rare, cost thousands, and were found in only one or two places. In 2023, everyone aged 45 and under effectively can be trained in a week tops on computer systems. 2023 is simply not like 1990 and earlier, when you really did want experience in computers, um, since they were expensive, uh, finicky, and could be broken horribly by people who didn't know them. This dynamic applies in Ukraine because they had deep societal penetration of computers in young Ukrainians in a way Russia didn't, because Russian oil money was never shared with the wider society. So that, going back to that Gini index, the rich and the poor in Russia, there's a massive gap between them, and the oligarchy has kept all that money in the top areas of society and it's not filtered down. The whole idea of trickle down economics, particularly in this weird oligopoly uh, um, that is Russia. Trickle down economics doesn't work, right? There's all the evidence, all the stats, it doesn't particularly work. So you need strategic planning from the government to equalize these things, somehow. But some governments do it particularly badly. Russia has obviously done it not at all, and or not particularly well at all, which is odd considering their history, and so on and so forth. It's just, yeah, whatever. But money stays at the top, doesn't trickle down, and it means you don't have deep penetration in this context of computer use. Is the example here, or is a point here? Um, so so just to go about that, this dynamic applies in Ukraine because they had deep societal penetration of computers in young Ukrainians in a way Russia didn't, because Russian oil money was never shared with the wider society. The USA has the same income stratifications as Russia due to the world's largest financial markets values, but total US wealth is much higher, so everyone has a smartphone or computer. So it's like there is this massive gap between rich and poor in America, but that's kind of the whole thing's shifted up, right? So actually, you do have a lot of poverty there, but within that poverty, a lot of people also have smartphones. It's like it's almost become a kind of necessity. Wi-Fi these days is a necessity, so on and so forth. That's a real oversimplification, obviously. I've used this meme several times to capture this computer sociology of Ukrainian soldiers maintaining all the newest Western 155 SP artillery. AFU has a small number of the Polish Crab, French Caesar, German Panzer 2000, US Norwegian M109 A3G, and Czech Dana SP howitzers, and are simply saying, more please, as they shoot out the barrels at the Russians. And this is the meme he uses there. It's like not a problem for the Ukrainians, so they say. Or so it seems. As a then 50 something teaching 25 to 30 something DCMA new hires in government computer systems, this effect was rubbed in my face quite often. The thing to remember is that Ukraine is maintaining 45 years worth of different Soviet tank designs of T-62, 64, 72, 80, and T-90. There are 5 different tanks with 4 different autoloaders, 3 different engines, including a turbine, and differences in and huge differences in fire controls. None of these tanks are particularly easy to maintain. A T-72 engine, the most common design, comes in different power levels based on the quality and control of its particular build, the lowest powered ones being on a T-72 hulls used in engineering and recovery variants. And Ukraine has captured 1,000 Russian tanks, many out of deep reserves of every conceivable variation. Transitioning to newer Western vehicles is easy because they were built to have lower maintenance hours, because volunteer soldiers were more expensive per hour than the conscript. Western combat vehicles have a higher upfront cost, in part because Western nations spend a lot of money during development making their vehicles easier to maintain. Adding more space under armor for access panels to be able to fix things is expensive in terms of upfront cost, but if it saves 5,000 maintenance hours over a tank's 20-year service life and it has a 15% higher serviceability rate to train crews, that is a bargain. This is a total cost of ownership thing. The West tries to make the cost of operations a metric as part of weapons development. The Russians don't go there because free conscripts. Computer literate Ukrainian maintainers take all the DVDs and USB drives filled with PDF files of Western weapons manuals, run an English, French, German to Ukrainian language translation software, and have at it. New Western weapons are simply easier for computer literate Ukrainians to maintain than the leftover and ever changing ex Soviet junk heap they have been fighting with since February the 24th, 2022. The announcements like the one at the beginning of this thread, so the big US announcement, are usually preceded by a lot of training and logistics we just don't see. So that might already have happened. There is a lot more to war than fighting. Logistics is literally everything except the shooting and killing. This thread was written to teach you to understand these soft factors at work in the Russo-Ukrainian war. Really useful thread to show or to kind of try and explain that actually, yeah, it is a bit of a nightmare. They have all these different types of kit and all this different stuff to learn, but actually, they're pretty good at it. And just the experience of doing that with the multiplicity of Russian systems means that actually those skills are fairly transferable and they should be able to work and maintain all these different systems coming at them. It's just, yes, it might be on the face of it a bit of a challenge, but it's a challenge that the Ukrainians are well able to overcome. Fascinating thread. Thank you, Trent. So France, there's moving to a different subject now. France calls on Russia to withdraw its troops from Ukraine and says that the Kremlin's unilateral ceasefire announcement on the occasion of the Orthodox Christmas will not mislead anyone. This is stated in a statement of the French Foreign Ministry. So this is really good. This is where Macron has suddenly changed his tune and is presenting a much stronger front against Russia. Now, some might argue that, yeah, Britain was doing this early doors, and I got a bit of hassle for kind of downplaying Britain yesterday when actually they were the ones who came up with the goods when no one else maybe was. Right at the beginning of the war, when things were looking worse, Britain was there standing strong. And I guess that is right. It's possibly easier for leaders now, Scholz and Macron, to come along and say, yeah, we're going to give you loads of stuff. Yeah, that would have been nice like 6 months ago. So that's great, absolutely great that you're doing that now. But are you doing that because the tide's turned and you can see that actually this is only going to end in one way, maybe. But nonetheless, it is still brilliant that Macron is saying this because there is the very real threat that people get tired of supporting Ukraine. Other things will happen. The money might get tight, cost of living crisis. China will take over the news cycle, whatever. So this is great. And I'll try and translate this with French that I haven't particularly spoken in 25 years. So the unilateral announcement by the Kremlin of a ceasefire in the event of on the Orthodox Christmas has not fooled anyone. The French have restated their conviction, their deep conviction for a lasting and a just and lasting peace that won't be obtained without the total retreat of the Russian troops from the whole of the Ukrainian territory. So that's a really big statement there. It is the only way of ending the suffering that has confronted Ukrainian people since for 11 months, and whose courageous fight for their liberty and independence in the face of Russian aggression. Um, Something like that. Sorry, I've kind of butchered that. So on and so forth. So this is really strong language and really clear language of Macron here, saying, "Yeah, we are going to support Ukraine until the Russians are out of their territory." And at the bottom here, talking about being in agreement with the 10-point plan presented by Zelensky And they're in agreement with that. So this is really great. It's really great to see France stand shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainians here. Okay, moving on. This is Shashank Joshi, the defense correspondent of The Economist, quoting from a FT article. FT's behind a paywall, unfortunately, for most of their stuff. One friend likened the experience of living in Moscow to the classic 1978 remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where fear and paranoia grip the human protagonists as they struggle to work out which of their friends have been replaced by monsters. This is fascinating. So the idea is that in Moscow, which is your more liberal urban center of Russia, where you're going to and traditionally have had people who decry central government and Putin, you're more likely to get people against Putin in Moscow rather than in other cities further away in the extremities uh, of the country. It's kind of guessing who is going to be pro and who is going to be against the Kremlin or Putin here, and trying to guess that is a dangerous pastime. The anti war Russians, it says, who have not left the country have opted for a Soviet tactic of internal emigration, whereby the kitchen table has once again become the only arena for civic discourse. The idea that you get together with friends that you know believe the same things as you and you talk about this at the kitchen table is too dangerous to do it elsewhere and potentially online. You might get arrested and in trouble. The bestseller tables in Moscow's bookshops have an Aesopian flavor, a collection of Tolstoy's pacifist writings, life in Germany during the rise of Nazism, and philosophical musings about intellectuals' culpability in war. Books by writers labeled foreign agents, a black mark equating them with spies, are now sold wrapped in brown paper. Many Russian language pop crooners have been blacklisted for criticizing the war, so on and so forth. I think that's fascinating. It's interesting to see how Russia perhaps has regressed after the start of the war as a result of the war, and where dissent in Russia is exceptionally dangerous, and ideas are alternative viewpoints are seen as problematic and wrapped in brown paper bags or not allowed to be heard at all. Anyway, let's go on this. I thought this was quite funny, and this is actually I probably should have done this before the last one. Um, this is because this is referring back to the idea that Scholz and Macron have turned up Johnny come lately to the table to give their equipment to Russia, and this is Thomas Tyner putting it in a very acerbic manner, very poignant here. And I don't know how accurate this is. If you're German in my threads, please tell me whether you see this as accurate. Depends whether you're pro Scholz or not. Here, so March 2022, Tyner says, Ukraine, we want to buy 100 plus Marder. Scholz, we have no Marders available. Ukraine, German industry has 200 plus available. Scholz, not true. German industry, we request an export license for 100 Marder. Scholz, hey, Greece, do you want to buy 200 Marder? Greece, yes, please. April 2022, Ukraine, what? Scholz, what? Ukraine, you said no Marders are available. Scholz, correct. No Marders are available. Ukraine, you just offered Greece 200. Scholz, exactly. None. Now none are available. German industry, we still have 100 available the moment you sign the export license. Scholz, what export license? German industry, the one we sent you last month. Scholz, no, you didn't. May 2022. Scholz, hey, Slovakia, want to buy 100 Marder? Slovakia, no thanks, send them to Ukraine instead. Ukraine, yes, please. Scholz, no Marders are available. Ukraine, what the hell? January 2023, that should be. Biden, we will send Bradleys to Ukraine. Macron, we will send AMX 10 RC to Ukraine. Ukraine, thank you, you're the best. Scholz, hey, I just found 100 Marder for you. Isn't it amazing what I do for you? I amaze myself about me all the time too. Everyone else, yeah. I don't know if that's accurate, but it certainly seems to be the way it's played out, at least to some degree, that Germany is willing to do stuff if it sees other people doing it first, but is not a leader in helping Ukraine. So I don't know. Agree or disagree? It's up to you. I showed you these this morning that how the Russian, according to the Ukrainians, of course, all the caveats attached to that, how the Russian missile stocks are being steadily depleted. This was the infographic for the stocks in November, middle of November. 13% of Iskanders, 74% of Onyx, and 87% of S300s. So those are your ground launched missiles. Now, what the new one does is it splits up, rather than splitting it into ground, sea, and air, it splits it up into ground, sea, and air, but within other categories. So you get your strategic missiles, your kind of cruise missiles, your tactical missiles, and your drones. Uh, so the organization is slightly different. But if we were to look at Iskander, 900 stock, 48 produced in that time up to November, there were 119 remaining. That's 13% of their stocks. And then that's gone on to 92 remaining, 11% of their stocks. And these figures are really important. They're just there aren't the missiles there that they need if they're going to enter into a war with NATO, for example. The strategic reserves aren't there. There are 59 calibers left. They've made 150. They had 500, but they fired 591, 9%. Whereas if we look at calibers before, they had 37%. They had 227 left. So they have just in a couple of months, less than a couple of months, fired off a huge amount of calibers. And then when we look at their KH missiles, their cruise missiles, again, they've used up a decent stock of them, particularly the KH 101. They're not even making the KH 22 or 32, but they do have a number of those left. And although they seem to have a number of Kinzhal left, 84%, they've only got 53 of those missiles. So I think this is a very interesting infographic to look at. I want to know how accurate it is, of course. What we certainly know is they have an absolute shed load of S300s, and they've got a shed load of them left. So if we see an awful lot of inaccurate use of ground to ground S300 missiles used, then that we should expect that. That's what they've got the most of. Right. Moving on. Uh, every infantry platoon in modern armies will soon have such capabilities. This is fascinating stuff. So, new Israeli strike drone, as armed with hand grenades, can drop them on targets or accurately fire into rooms where enemy forces hide. Commando units already equipped with this lethal weapon, and the army plans to equip infantry units next. So they report in Israel. Wow, we are going to see things like that more and more in modern armies. This is uh, I, we've seen drones drop all sorts of munitions. So clearly, the next thing is drones getting down closer to the action and launching these IEDs through windows rather than just being able to drop them by releasing a catch. Actually, have some kind of propulsion so it can throw things around and support units on the ground in a much more interactive manner. Uh, and I I think it's fascinating to see what's being tried out in this war at the moment, and to see where warfare will go uh, relatively soon. One thinks. Okay, this I don't really want to linger on this picture because it's inappropriate. This is dead bodies, but this is just an example. This is one picture: 33 Russian Wagner PMC um, soldiers were killed by the Ukrainian army, and there they lie on the front line, not cleared up. The question is that something that happens the uh, for the Ukrainians as well? I've seen so many of those sorts of pictures of Russians. I've seen a whole host of pretty horrific stuff. Yes, Wagner are doing better in Bakhmut at the moment than the Ukrainians. They are making some gains, but at what cost? The thing is, Russians see that cost. Prigozhin and the Kremlin see that as an acceptable cost. Yeah, a whole bunch of convicts that we're not going to have to pay to look after in prison, sent to the front lines, sent in waves. Most of them will die, but we'll get a bit of a victory out of it somehow. There you go. Moving on to Belarus again. So I asked you what do you think was going on with Belarus? There have been all these um, images and videos of echelons of Russian military equipment and troops being sent to Belarus. Is that a psyops? Is that just for training? Why would they send all that equipment just for training? Is it for a genuine threat of, and genuinely for an operation they're going to launch against Ukraine from the north? Open question. Lots more videos come out. I do wonder whether this is actually from the last few days. Someone was saying that there hasn't been that much snow or no snow in Poland, and Belarus is just over the border. So where's this snow coming from? But other echelons of equipment going into Russia. The question could be then: is this psyops from Russia saying, "Look, what we're sending to Belarus," and actually it's not. That wasn't from recently, and that isn't being sent there. However, the question is still: there is definitely a bunch of equipment in Belarus now and a bunch of troops. So the question is, what are they going to do with them if they do attack? As I said before, marshy, boggy here. You'll need all sorts of bridge laying. There's minefields all over the shop. It would be really slow movement coming down here over these marshy areas that also go into Belarus. That I think would be difficult. So therefore, is it a launch towards Kyiv? Is it to take Chernihiv? Other people have mentioned that actually Lviv would be a sensible place for them to attack. Some people have said that actually they should have attacked that right at the beginning, but they didn't really know how much equipment they're going to be sent from the west. There is a lot of equipment that comes across here, right? And ideally, the Russians would like to stop that from happening. So they would want to do something like that. The question is, yeah, that sounds great, but how many troops do you have? How much equipment do you have to throw at this? Because that would take a huge amount, not only to get over all of this uh, area, assuming that they aren't just going to be able to easily drive down roads, that the Air Force will be able to, have a pop at them, and so on and so forth. Exactly, what do they intend, and B, how do they intend to succeed if that is what their objectives truly are? Here it's so close to Poland. I just think it's all too much of a risk, and it's just out of their capability. I just don't think they'll be able to come down to Lviv. I don't think they'll be able to take on Kyiv. I just don't think they've got the forces, or even though they've amassed a bunch of stuff. I think it's particularly great stuff, and I don't think the soldiers would be great. And I'm not sure Belarus would want to commit their forces to such an attack. I think it'd be deeply unpopular, and without his forces there, he'd be weaker at home. Arguably, Lukashenko, the leader, who is essentially a puppet of the Kremlin, and they're dubiously in charge democratically of the country anyway. So yeah, uh, answers on a postcard. Do you agree or not? What do you think these troops will do? Is that a realistic idea to attack to Lviv? I don't think it is. But then is Kyiv realistic? No, I don't think it is. So then what? What's the point? That's the end of my extra today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate that. Please like, subscribe, and share. All the ways that you can support my channel are listed in the description below. I appreciate all the support I get on Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal and YouTube. Thanks and all that. So thank you so much. And obviously for the memberships.